Hey guys, thanks for clicking on this video. Before I get into it, I'd just like to suggest visiting my Patreon page, the link is in the description under this video, where you can learn how to support, or not support if you don't want to, my animated dinosaur series which I'm currently working on called Dino Defenders Extreme. The link is in the description below as I've just mentioned, so there we go. Anyway guys, enjoy my video. Everyone is familiar with the name King Kong. Many out there will know the character well, but for those who don't, I'd like to take a trip through the history of the giant ape from the 1933 film to 2020's Godzilla vs. Kong, and give you guys my thoughts on the eighth wonder of the world. The year was 1933. It was the darkest period of the Great Depression. 25% of the US labour force was unemployed, and ticket sales at the movie theatres were low, causing many to shut down. But on March 2nd, at the newly finished Radio City Music Hall and the new RKO Roxy Theatre, with almost 10,000 people watching, a movie was shown that would change the world and the landscape of film forever. That movie was King Kong. Kong was conceived in the mind of Merian C. Cooper, a man known for his adventurous lifestyle filming dramatised documentaries like Grass and Chang. It was during the filming of the 1929 version of The Four Feathers where he observed baboons in the wild and began forming the ideas of a Beauty and the Beast tale involving a giant gorilla being brought back to civilization. The character of Carl Denham, played by Robert Armstrong, is somewhat based off Cooper himself, with the catalyst for the plot being Carl Denham's pursuit of his next big adventure. King Kong is a story of a filmmaker looking to capture his new project on a mysterious landmass called Skull Island, which is rumoured to be the home of a monster known as Kong. He enlists an actress called Anne Darrow, played by Fay Wray, to star in his new picture, and hires the crew of a ship called the Venturer to take them on a voyage into the unknown. Once on the island, Anne is captured by natives to be sacrificed to King Kong, a giant ape monster who the natives regard as some form of god. Kong, intrigued by the natives' offering, disappears with Anne into the dark jungles of Skull Island, rather than eating her. Earlier in the movie, whilst en route to the island, the ship's first mate, Jack Driscoll, falls in love with Anne, and after she is captured by the giant beast, he and the crew, including Carl Denham, set off into the jungles to rescue Anne. The effects for the movie were created by the legendary Willis O'Brien, who was hired after his outstanding work on The Lost World from 1925. He used a combination of effects including stop motion, animatronics, rear projection and glass matte paintings to bring the jungles and inhabitants of Skull Island to life. O'Brien created 2 Kong armatures for the project, using latex rubber moulded over a metal posable skeleton and rabbit fur to cover the body. Today, one of the original armatures is owned by director Peter Jackson, who would later go on to direct a remake of King Kong in 2005, but we're not there yet. It must be emphasised that back in 1933, nothing like this had ever been seen to this scale and expertise, and even to this day, the effects of King Kong are impressive. Many times I've marvelled at the achievements of the effects, dumbfounded by how they've managed to combine layers and layers of elements to bring certain scenes to life. Like for example, one of my favourite shots is this one of King Kong fighting an Elasmosaurus. You can see that Jack Driscoll is in the foreground, Kong is fighting the Elasmosaurus behind the rock that he's hiding behind, and in the background you can see Anne on the rocks behind the actual fight. And beyond her there is a background of the interior of the cave. All these elements playing together at once on screen makes for some really well crafted special effects which like I said, I marvel to this day. Honestly, this is one of my favourite films of all time. If I had a top 10, this would probably be in the top 5. Despite being over 85 years old, it still has the power to enthrall audiences to this day. I recently sat down with my 4-year-old nephew to show him the original film for the first time, and he could not keep his eyes off the screen. What really gets me every time I sit down to watch this film is how it never really feels old. It's like watching a modern blockbuster full of outlandish effects and crazy set pieces, but done back in 1933. It's one of the reasons I call this film the first blockbuster. Scenes were completely lost or cut from later, more censored releases of the film, some of which included a brontosaurus mauling a crewman in the water and later killing him up a tree, a scene involving Kong undressing Andaro, Kong killing several natives when he attacks a village, Kong biting a reporter during his escape in New York, and Kong mistaking a sleeping woman for Anne and dropping her to her death. One infamous scene involving the characters being attacked by large insects at the bottom of a canyon was actually deemed too gruesome by RKO, and thus the scene was studio self-censored prior to the original release. The original footage of this scene is now considered lost forever, with only a few artist sketches remaining that depict this certain horrific encounter. Peter Jackson would later recreate this lost scene using the same technology from 1933, which perfectly captured what might have been filmed all those years ago, and he also included the infamous spider pit sequence in his remake. Luckily, the Blu-ray version of King Kong, which I happen to own, restores the film back to its original 1933 cut, with all of the censored scenes added back in, except for the spider pit sequence, although Peter Jackson's version is part of the special features. Not only a fantastic feat for special effects, but a long-lasting, timeless masterpiece whose impact on the world of cinema can still be felt to this day. A colorized version of the film was released for TV viewers in the late 1980s, which gave audiences a different perspective of the classic. Also recently, a musical has been in production based on the story, which uses a huge 1-for-1 scale puppet. But most famously, there was a King Kong ride called the King Kong Encounter, which first opened at Universal Studios in 1986. Unfortunately, this was burnt down during a fire in 2008, only to be replaced by King Kong 360 which opened in 2010. I never got to ride the original Kong Encounter, but I have been on the 360 version twice, and boy, is it awesome. The character has been parodied to no end since its release, with Kong appearing in car commercials and episodes of The Simpsons, even having songs written about the character, most notably Jimmy Castor Bunch's song aptly named King Kong. The character and movie have been referenced countless times over the years, but also, I think perhaps in ways more than people realise. I've talked extensively about my love of the original film and won't stop anytime soon, but we must be moving forward in this series. Up next, it's Son of Kong, the sequel that was made and released the same year in 1933. Stay tuned.